It gave me more self-confidence, more self-pride in what I do. And while I'm not always the best at what I do, I give it my best all the time. That's what military training did for me.
Hi, I'm Bud Harper. I joined the service when I was 19 in August of '51. So first I wanted to be a Mountie. I wanted it all since I was a little kid. But I went to join the Mounties and I was about 1.5 inches too short. So the second choice was the Army, so in I went.
Hello, my name is Ron Green. I joined the military in 1962, 2 days after my 16th birthday. I went to Ottawa to join, and then from Ottawa to Wolseley Barracks for my basic training. Finished my basic training, stayed in London, Ontario at Wolseley Barracks with the 2nd Battalion of the Royal Canadian Regiment.
Hi, my name is Frank Reed. I joined the Army in 1972 and spent 8.5 years in the military. Well, I joined the Army because I'm from down east, and if you knew anything about down east in the old days, in the 70s and the 60s, if you didn't join the Army, you starved to death. And I really didn't want to starve to death, so my only option was join the Army and see the world.
Hi, I'm Hardy Utek. I served with the Royal Canadian Regiment, 1st Battalion, from 1974 to 1977. Well, I always sort of had a bent for the military. I had been in the Air Cadets, and I had actually planned on enlisting in the Air Force. My job was taking me nowhere. And so I had thought of refinisher technician in the Air Force, which was painting aircraft, but the occupational hazards were falling off ladders, falling off scaffolding, and I'm terrified of both, so I went with infantry and was sworn in February '74, and I left for Cornwallis Recruit School 3 weeks later.
Hi, my name is Jim Gardner, and I spent 23 years in the military and had a vast experience that I've never thought I'd experience in my life. You know, it's kind of funny. When I was growing up, my parents always said I was an outdoor kid. And they started me off. I did the old route with the Cubs, loved it, Scouts. Then when I got into high school, I joined the reserves. I just loved being in the outdoors. And my next progression, because I grew up in the era of the 60s with the old war movies and TV series, I went right into the military as soon as I left high school. And to me, to this day right now, I don't regret those memories at all. I've met some great people, had some great times.
Hi, I'm Jeff Allen. I've spent 5 years in the Canadian Armed Forces. I joined the Armed Forces, first of all, in 1981, joined the Reserves. I spent 1 year in the Reserves in St. Catharines, and then I joined the regular forces in 1982. And at that time, it was the Cold War, still the Cold War era. And when the Argentinians invaded the Falkland Islands, and we all thought at that time that, you know, all of us were in the infantry and basic training. We thought, okay, boy, this is our chance. So I hope that the British, you know, give us a call and we go fight with the British for the Falkland Islands.
I am Sang Ik Bang. I am currently a serving member with the Royal Highland Fusiliers of Canada, which is an Army Reserve unit based out of Kitchener and Cambridge. I was born in Korea and I moved to Canada when I was 9, so 2001. And then I joined the military when I was 19. I volunteered for a tour in Afghanistan mainly for 2 reasons. First reason is that as an infantry soldier, we train, we take courses, but unless you actually see if you could do your job on an actual tour, then it's kind of like you go to, like a doctor go to all these years in school, but you never get to practice medicine on a patient. So it's kind of the same thing for me, is that I want to see if I could do my job in an overseas operation. And my second reason was that there are a lot of Korean War veterans from Canada and from other countries that during the Korean War that also served, and Without their sacrifice, then I would not be here. So I thought it was important for me to, maybe in my own way, for future generation to hopefully do some good by volunteering on this tour.
I spent 4 years in Germany. I spent 2 years with 3 Mech Commando, and I spent 2 years with 3 RCR. During my time over there, I got to work with people in the Americans, the British, the French, the Germans. It was an awesome experience. We did very large exercises in Germany. We did exercises with 250,000 people, so it was pretty awesome to see that happen. We worked with all the different militaries of the world, and I also worked with the French Foreign Legion for a while. We did a lot of training with them on a course, and it was quite interesting. It was a lot of height. We worked in the height area all the time, and I hate height. And we had to go up and do a lot of different things like that. And it was, I got through it, but it was pretty difficult.
Oh, weather in Korea was something different. We call it cold here, but it was colder there, I found the wintertime, but not much snow, just a couple inches of snow, but really cold and windy. And then in late summer or early fall, we have what they call the monsoon season. It's about 2 weeks of steady rain, fine rain. Everything is wet, except you try to keep your ammunition dry, of course. But
some of the dates that sticks in my mind very clearly was October 1962. I had just finished my basic training and was stationed at the barracks in London, Ontario, and that was during the beginning of the Cuban Missile Crisis. And I can remember being in the barracks, and the sergeant ran in and said, "Boys, you're confined to barracks. The Cuban Missile Crisis was about to heat up." And for a 16-year-old who had just finished basic training, I kept saying to myself, I wonder what I got myself into here, and that was kind of a scary time. The next date that sticks in my mind was, I was about a year in the Army, a little better than a year in the Army, and I was doing an anti-tank course, and Sergeant Ekstrom, the anti-tank platoon sergeant, came in and said, "Anybody know what happened to Abraham Lincoln?" And of course everybody said, "Yeah, he was assassinated." And he said, "President John F. Kennedy has just been shot this afternoon." And President Kennedy passed on later that evening. And that's a date that sticks in my mind. And right away, at that particular point in time during the Cold War, that everybody was, every communist there was hanging behind a tree, and they didn't know if it was a communist plot or what. And that was really a kind of a tense time for everyone.
The NATO exercises were multinational, so we worked with the Americans and the British and Germans and the French, as well as the Norwegian Army. One thing that did happen in Norway was 1986, March 1986. We were on exercise, and a group of Norwegian soldiers were trying to get around our position and up in the mountains, and an avalanche happened and basically buried 24 Norwegian soldiers. 7 of them died. So at that time it kind of struck us that, oh boy, we're in dangerous territory, and dangerous things happen.
My tours in Cyprus, my first one, was kind of mundane because it was 1984 and nothing much was going on at that time. But as the peace process went in, when I went back in 1989, it was more protests going on because they wanted to unify the island. It was the first time they let reporters from the Greek side go on the Turk side. It was growing up. So we had a lot of protests, riots, and that's what we dealt with mostly. And one of the funniest things in a way, we're expecting a protest from the Women's Walk Home, and they called off the riot, but they still kept coming anyways. And this poor guy that lives in Kitchener, I still remember that all we heard was he's here, and he was grabbing onto this fence post like this, and they were beating him with the flag. Not that hard, but it was one of those ones. He was just trying to keep them out from getting hurt, because if he would let them through, it wouldn't have turned out well, because the Turkish army was right there behind. And It's funny now, but at the time it was serious business, and it was. But it was another time where I met some great friends in the Army, and it's to this day it is an ongoing conflict that they haven't finished, and I hope I'm alive when it does.
I think it was my second week and I was working out of Kandahar City, which is the biggest city in southern Afghanistan, and I was just resting in my room in the base after a day of patrolling, and I heard a loud boom and dust starting to fall on my head. Now the loud booms were you kind of get used to it after the first couple of days, because it's always bombs dropping or artillery shots, and so it's kind of one of those noises that you get used to. But this one was extremely loud, and there was never dust fell on my head, anything like that. And my warrant officer, he came into my room and said, "Kid up, and there's something happening." So I ran out and put on my gear. And at this time, I had no idea what was going on at this time, because there was very little information available. But as throw my kit on, and I'm just getting ready for whatever orders that came down, I get told help with the security of the HLS, which is the helicopter landing site, because what turned out was that Taliban decided to plant a IED or a bomb on a fuel tanker, and they drove it to a NGO, non-government organization housing area, which is about a kilometer away from my base, and they blew it up. So there were massive amount of casualties, and the local hospital wasn't able to take all the casualties. So a lot of them had to be filtered through my base, so they get helicopter lifted out to a hospital in Kandahar Airfield. So that was my first real impression, mental impression that this is for real. I'm in Afghanistan, and there are bad guys who are they're out to trying to hurt me and my friends.
One thing I found that boosts your morale over there was mail from home. It's always in the post, of course, but there was no such thing as cell phones then, so that's something you could count on, is mail from home. That's it.
At the end of 1965, in February, we went up to Alaska in January for an exercise with the American Army in Alaska, and during that particular time, the Canadian flag, which we always used to be represented with the Union Jack, and at that time, February, I believe was the 15th, 1965, Canada officially got their own flag, and the plan was at noon hour, every embassy and unit and Ottawa, you name it, was to raise the flag at 12 o'clock their time. And as I recall, we were one of the first military unit to raise the Canadian flag on foreign soil. And we were in a valley in Alaska, and it was winter, and with the mountains, we never seen the sun until about 10 o'clock in the morning, and the sun came overhead, and we lost the sun again on the other side of the mountains, on the other side of the valley, about 4 o'clock. So we had very short daylight time. But on this particular day at noon hour, the sun had broken through, and the flag was fluttering in the breeze, and you could see your breath, and everybody was standing at attention around the flag. And it was something that I think when they called attention, everybody's chest came out another 2 inches. And to me, it was one of the proudest moments, not only being a soldier, but also being a Canadian. And it was a very moving ceremony, and it still sticks in my mind to this day.
My most memorable thing I ever had was especially in Bosnia. In 1992, we were doing a convoy between two towns, and this woman came out carrying a baby, and she was running after our convoy yelling, "Bonbons, bonbons." She was looking for food. And I remember that, and I went back in 1994 and went along the same patrol route. And the sad thing is, the woman came running out this time, but this time the child was running beside her. And they were yelling for food again, bonbons, bonbons. And I was remembering that to this day. And the only thing I hope for is, while we were there, we helped this family survive. They weren't living the best, but they were surviving. But it just still strikes me to this day, and that would be the one story I'll always remember. Watching this child grow up in a way, just looking for food. Watching the way people lived there, caught between war zones, between different ethnic groups and warlords and old farmers coming out to our garbage truck, because Canadians, we were wasteful, and just taking whatever they could because they could use it and we couldn't. Those were the things I remember, because even back in my scout days, you always want to be prepared and you always wanted to help people. And being in the Army, that's what it did. It helped me do what I always thought it was the right thing, helping people. And like I said, I'll remember it to this day, and I'll remember the people that I was with to this day. It's kind of ingrained in my memory.
The first thing I saw when we went to Cyprus, we get off the plane, and there was this great, huge aircraft that had been burned when the bombing happened. And it was sitting there, and we come off, we walked down, and we got to walk by that, and that was a pretty sight to see. And then we get into the airport, and the airport was a brand new airport. It was a beautiful, beautiful airport that had just been built. And it was silent and eerie, and there was no lights on, there was no power. And we walked through this thing, and it was just an amazing thing to see. It was like something out of the movies you see.
One of the sad things, and it kind of even eats at me today, there was this old lady. I was in downtown Nicosia, and there's this old lady, she used to beg in the street, and she was so crippled and so malformed from whatever arthritis, whatever she had. People used to carry her out, put her on the sidewalk, and then she used to beg for alms. And I had money in my pocket. I could have given her lots. But there were also, I could see people watching her. And I thought, if I give this woman anything, as soon as I turn the corner, someone will steal it. And so I never gave her anything. But when I thought of it, years later, there was a cafe about a half a block away. I could have got her a cup of soup, given it to her, stayed there until she finished it. And then there's no way anybody could have taken that from her. But like I said, I was 18 or 19 at the time. That's not something you think about. So that's one of the things that opens your eyes to the world. You think you have so little or you have it so hard, but there's always somebody out there who has it way worse.
Yeah, serving in peacetime can be dangerous. There's the 7 Norwegian soldiers that died in Norway. When I was posted to the Airborne Regiment, I had an acquaintance, a friend. I'll call him a friend. He went to Edmonton on jump course, giving his free fall course, and he didn't come back. So he died on a jump in Edmonton. There was numerous accidents. One time we were on a night drop, and most of our parachute descents were at night, and you're landing in fields. One was a night drop on a frozen lake, and 34 of us got injured. I came away okay, but it is dangerous, and people do get injured, and gladly enough, not too many die in peacetime, but it is a dangerous job.
Whenever I was there, I tried to present a positive image of the Canadian people because I wanted an Afghan person, when they see the maple leaf, that they would know that as a Canadian, so that whatever action I do will reflect on credibility to Canada. So whenever I say hello to an Afghan, for that person, I may be the only Canadian person I know. So I try to be as positive, smiling, be polite, so that those Afghan people would go and tell their village or tell their friends and families that these Canadians are, they're there to help, and they're the friends of Afghan people.
It's a great experience getting in the service. Really terrific. You learn a lot and you grow up pretty quick. It seems to be that way. And everybody should be in for a few years, I'd say.
I think anybody watching this video or the CD will find that the face of the Canadian veteran is changing from the First World War, which we lost our last veteran about 2 years ago, to the Second World War veterans who are getting scarce in numbers these days. The Korean veterans who were hitting into the 80s, and now we have the veterans from peacekeeping, Bosnia, Afghanistan, and all these people are fighting for freedom, and with freedom comes responsibility. And I would like all you guys out there to take responsibility and carry the flag high, and hopefully someday you may be a member of the Armed Forces also.
In closing, I'd just like to say to the students that have a chance to see this DVD, and the students that are lucky enough to have a chance to have somebody served in the military talk to them and tell them about their experiences, to dig a little deeper and look and say, okay, what has our military done for us? Because our military has basically been in every conflict since World War I and all the peacekeeping across the world. And we've lost a lot of good people in those conflicts, whether they were armed conflicts or whether they were peacekeeping. So I would advise the people seeing this DVD to perhaps dig a little deeper. Thank you.
I think it's important for people to study history, especially Canadian history, because we always make same mistakes every time. And by learning from history and by learning from speaking with our veterans and to hear their stories, we learn about what has happened in the past so that we don't make the same mistakes again. That's why I think it's important that people, especially our younger generation, to speak with a veteran and to hear their stories, and also to do their own research on their own time by going to the library or the internet and look up the information on our Canadian history.
In my 23 years in the military, I retired as a sergeant, which really doesn't mean much to me now, except for the fact it's what I accomplished my time in the Army. But the biggest thing I did learn in the Army, and the things I've seen and the things I've done, is life is not a video game. This isn't Call of Duty or any of those games that you might think is real. What you're seeing is veterans and what they've really done. They have seen things and done things you may never know, and they may never tell you. But just remember, they have seen things that will weigh on them heavily. So it's not a game, it is real life, it is real death. When you go out there, when you see a veteran, just try to think, what have they seen? Just like I said, I can only press this enough. It is not a video game, it is the real world. Thank you.
One thing I like to say is to the kids nowadays is remember, of course, the soldiers, the veterans that have died in World War II and I and the Korean conflict. But remember the Bosnia, the Rwanda, remember the soldiers that have died in peacetime, that died serving their country, not just in conflict.
I would say to anybody in school now, keep an open mind, because the world changes constantly, all the time. Every 5 or 10 years, the world is told that politics are different, the workplace is different, the professions are different, and the teachers can tell you there are so many jobs out there, but it's a big world, and there are big opportunities out there. You just got to reach out and grab it.